have the all clear to start. Welcome to our panel today, discussion about hybrid media, which I'll explain in a minute. I'm Sharon Moshavi. I'm the president of the International Center for Journalists. We are an organization that supports news organizations around the world. We have a very large network of about 160,000 journalists we have worked with and supported in the last 5 years alone. So I'm very excited to be here with you all today. I want to talk a bit about exile media, which is not a new phenomenon. We know journalists who are under threat and are forced to leave their countries, their homes, in order to continue to do their jobs and often to preserve their life and limb. And it's not easy to do, to leave your friends and your family and move someplace else and try to continue to be a journalist. One of colleagues who we work with closely, Sami Mahdi of Afghanistan, who could not be with us today because he is one of the products of the challenges of being in exile media. He couldn't get a visa here or couldn't leave the United States where he has asylum, but he was not able to leave. So we'll talk about the travel challenges in a moment. But he refers to exile media now as hybrid media. This is media that is operating really with a foot in two worlds, existing outside the structures, outside the country where they are based, editors, organizations, reporters, and operating inside the country with journalists there who are still managing to work with sources, etc. Technology has very much enabled this creation of hybrid media, and we'll talk a bit about what that means and what is exile journalism and hybrid journalism. What is that able to do now? What are the challenges? And sadly, to report, not, I'm sure as we all know, this is a phenomenon that is sadly growing. Witness the three here with me. We see it in Russia. We see it in Venezuela, Nicaragua, Turkey, Afghanistan, Hong Kong. El Faro in El Salvador just announced a couple of days ago that it was now setting up offices in Costa Rica. So this is one of these trends that we would like to not see be a trend, but sadly it is. So I want to talk today about the threats and the challenges that these journalists face around safety and security, both digital and physical, about the legal issues, operational issues, travel issues, money, and the ability to report and understand what's happening on the ground. And my three panelists all here know this all too well. Let me introduce them. We have Sveta, I knew I'd butcher it. You do it. Okay, she says Russians have a hard time with it too, so I feel better. She's the co-director of VD, which is a Berlin-based NGO that manages two organizations, Maidan TV of Azerbaijan, which is Azerbaijan's largest online and independent news outlet, and also RUM, which is an independent Russian media outlet that inhabits the intersection of journalism and documentary filmmaking. On the end, we have Yavuz Baydar, who's the editor of Free Turkish Press, a new, very new independent news and commentary site in Turkey. Yavuz has been a journalist for more than 40 years, and he has lived outside Turkey since the January 2016 coup attempt. July. Yes, July. My notes were right. I misspoke. Thank you. And right here on my left is Tin Shui Young, who is an editor and journalist from Hong Kong. He's currently living and working in the UK and advising many Hong Kong exiled media. He's recently been an ICFJ Knight Innovation Fellow, and he's been researching how information technology, blockchain, internet archiving, and encryption can help journalists under threat of authoritarian rule to operate more freely and securely. So as I said in the beginning, there are many, many challenges, and I want to start by asking, first of all, thanking all of you for coming here, and to really start just by asking each of you to zero in on what is the single biggest challenge that you face now. Who would like to start?
So, okay, yes. Thank you, Sharon, for this opportunity to participate in this panel discussion. So, I wouldn't say that the biggest challenge is money, because it's always the challenge, regardless of you being a independent media outlet in a democratic country or in the country with a authoritarian regime. We're all struggling for funding or for making money. I would say that for us, now currently, the biggest challenge is to continue working from on the ground to ensure security of freelance journalists that continue working and reporting from inside Russia, and to find new journalists. Because after the Russian aggression started in February 2022, many editorial outlets left Russia. Then after the mobilization in September 2022, also many journalists left the country. So those who stay, they are extremely brave, but they are left without institutional support because there is no more editorial teams inside, or there is few of them. So I would say that for us, it's the biggest challenge now, is to find these people, to make sure that they have resources that they need, and to make sure that they are safe, although we know that we are very limited in our capacities to do so. Yeah.
We'll come back to the topic of freelancers, but Yavuz, what would you say the biggest challenges for you?
Well, to simply put it, I think there are three major challenges, at least from our country's journalist corps' point of view, for us in exile outside Turkey, particularly since the attempted coup in July 2016. We have experienced this in my earlier, now terminated news site, Ahval News Online, terminated because the boss had no more money. We couldn't follow the money anymore. So the media group based in London ran into trouble mainly because of COVID wave, and most of the experiences I have from there is, of course, as you mentioned it, it's the money. It's the also the reluctance in relation to this. We have experienced the funders, not all of them, but funders here and there, but scattered in Europe, Western Europe, also even in the United States. There was, as time went by, there was growing reluctancy to challenge the regime in Turkey. For one reason or another, we have even heard it directly from their sources that we don't want to rock the boat anymore because the wall is too thick. The wall we are facing is too thick, and we don't. Some of them said we don't want to jeopardize other projects in Turkey, like gender issues or Kurdish projects, etc. So this became a huge challenge. The second dimension is the sources, relations with the sources and editors in Turkey, which we faced a lot. We could always work with the brave editors and reporters on the field initially, but as the pressure increased, especially on the reporter side, except the Kurdish colleagues, who are more brave than the Turkish colleagues, I must say. It continued for a while, but coverage of politics in the capital, Ankara, and coverage of the second capital, financial capital of Turkey, Istanbul, became a challenge. Politics coverage, because we couldn't get to the ruling party, and also financial coverage in terms of corruption coverage, which was the huge challenge, and it still is. That was the sourcing and editors, reporters problem. Sourcing became another issue because we couldn't really, although we had some sources continuously feeding us, we couldn't mention them, which was a huge challenge for us in terms of credibility. And the third one, I think, that comes in that order is the polarization, which is far more spread, polarization within the journalist corps in Turkey, far more spread than the other countries' journalist corps. Within the segment, there are enmities, suspicions based on identities of journalists, Kurdish, Turkish, Alawite, etc., and also ideologies. Turkish journalists are far too, in my opinion, far too polluted by the ideologies rather than journalism per se. That is something that I brought up over 2 decades now, but it doesn't it doesn't help. So these are the 3 levels of challenges, I would say.
Certainly, money is a problem, as they have mentioned. Everyone understands that. But apart from money, I would also like to mention human resources. What I mean is that, journalists has been long, we are all known to be devoted to our career, but at least, if you are working in a proper local media, at least you have a career prospect. You work starting from a journalist, perhaps become an editor or a chief editor. You work in a somehow secure life. But I think when you work for hybrid media, your career is far less secure. So first of all, again, money is a problem. I don't think there is a very feasible independence model that works for hybrid media yet at this moment. And the second one is that, the reason that we have to work in exile is because of the political situation. And even when you work overseas, there is also there are also a lot of danger. Danger for yourself and also danger for perhaps your friends and family who are still in the authoritarian environments. All these things discourage journalists who are in exile or even local to continue to work for hybrid media, and it makes us in the management level. I think it makes us very difficult to convince people to work for us long term. Even people willing to work for us, they tend to take it as a temporary job. They take it as a freelance or take it as a part-time. It is very difficult to get journalists to really devote their career to this hybrid media. And sometimes even they want to devote, from the management level, we feel sorry for our staff as well, because even ourselves feel difficult to convince them and convince ourselves that this job is going to be very secure and safe, and you can work for 10 or 20 years. So if we even convince ourselves, I think it's very difficult for us to recruit people.
Great, thank you all. So I want to unpack and dig into some of the issues more deeply that you all mentioned. Let's start with the reporting on the ground. Obviously, Hong Kong, Russia, and Turkey, there's a lot of danger to still be a reporter, an independent journalist working on the ground. How do you find your reporters and writers in country? How do you trust, and how do you build a relationship of trust, and how do you keep them secure? Is that your responsibility? Sveta, you want to start?
So yeah, it's a responsibility of their editorial team, yeah, and because the people who are working on the ground currently is all freelancers. They are all either on freelance contracts, and they just we commission them some work and pay accordingly, yeah, for video. We produce videos, so all journalists that work for us, it's either camera operators, video journalists. So they actually also cannot work underground, because you have to meet people, you have to film them, you have to show your face, and you show face of your protagonist. So I would say there's the question of security not only for journalists, but also for protagonists they work with. So we built the network of Rome focuses on stories of people from Russian regions. We try not to report much about Moscow, because there's so many reporters and outlets focusing on Moscow. We focus on Russia is big, and we focus more on the regions. So we work a lot with local journalists, also with local regional media outlets. We monitor them and see the stories, and if we find a story that we find interesting for ourselves, so then we contact local journalists and we work together. We work a lot in collaborations when, for example, a local outlet. They don't have capacities to produce videos, but they do text journalism, then we produce videos. So it's very actually good format to work together and to amplify also our reach and our resources somehow, to save resources. As to trust issues, so yeah, we started the project, our project in Russia has been launched in 2016, and we've been working since this for 6 years, even more now. And we've been building this network, yeah, for all these years. We mentored our freelancers. We had written editorial guidelines for them. So whenever we start working with someone, we share these guidelines. We also have developed security protocols on digital security, how to travel safely. So we train freelancers we work with on this. And we have a position security officer. We introduced this position recently, a year ago, who is responsible for training, mentoring, reassessing the risks and updating security protocols. So it's something that is in place, and I think it's very important to have, because it's our responsibility to, because what we noticed also, that freelancers, even the most experienced journalists, but since they work for themselves, they work today they work for us, tomorrow they work for another media outlet. So actually they themselves don't have these protocols, security protocols that they should follow, because no one implies these protocols on them. Yeah, so some of them know more, and some of them are not trained at all. And certain things like, I don't know, two-factor authentication, that's for some of us is like daily routine, as you know, brush your teeth. They don't know how to use it, so you have to train people, you have to explain them how to do this, and it's our responsibility. I think it's our responsibility as like outlet, as an institution.
I'm curious, and anyone else can jump in as well. Have you had any issues? Has there been a freelancer or a trust issue, a major security issue? Or I'm curious about that.
Yes, and actually it's not only freelance journalists who report from on the ground, but also it's activists who are very brave, but they don't have any training in like journalism. And we had a situation, for example, last year when we commissioned to a freelancer, actually it's not a professional journalist, it's an activist, very brave person, to film anti-war protests. The person went there, they made the shooting, and then they decided to participate in the protest themselves. Because they are citizens, of course, yeah, I think it's this conflict also, professional journalists, they have to, they face this challenge every day. Who I am? Am I a journalist in the first place, or am I a citizen? And for Russian citizens, for Russian independent journalists, with the start of the war, it's challenge, like it's a daily challenge. You have to make the decision every day. So yeah, they filmed the protest, then they participated in protest themselves, and they have been detained, and their camera had been taken off by the police. So it means we have to train them not only on security, but also on editorial basics.
Yeah, those you mentioned the polarization of Turkish media. How do you then handle working with writers and journalists in Turkey, given some of the issues that Sveta is mentioning?
It was a challenge, and it continued to be a challenge, because the rumor machinery in such cases, people who, if there are people from Latin America in the audience, they would remember this. It was intensified during the regime of Fujimori in Peru, the character assassinations, labelings, all these stamps that are put on the editors and the brand, etc., etc. And some of the members of the journalist corps jump on that ship and continue parroting these kind of template words, brands, etc., which go viral, and then people who you approach in terms of finding and recruiting an editor or a reporter or so, there is this hesitation and rejection too, it was a huge challenge to talk sense into them, telling that this is a journalistic project, etc., etc. Still, some of them say that it's a huge risk if you are branded as such. And some of them said, no, I don't agree with what you are doing, etc. And you ask why, they don't really have a convincing answer. So still, I mean, the main issue, as a response that I would give you, to your main question, is that works against this, that works in favor of hybrid media, exile media, is the unemployment. In the case of Turkey, unemployment amongst the journalists, because the Erdogan government, and especially since Gezi Park protests in 2013, exactly a year now, no, it was in May 2013, turned upside down everything. He genetically modified Turkish media, if you know what I mean. It turned it upside down. It's not the same genetics, the same DNA as we had before. So one part of the result is that unemployment. At one point, we had up to 40% of the journalist corps unemployed. That, of course, is an incentive to find work, and it was helpful. So usually they found us. We didn't have to find them, and they were going through second or third sources, and I want to work with you, I want to do this, etc., etc. And regarding safety dimension, we didn't have any during Ahval Online period, which was for exactly 5 years, from November 2017 to November last year. We had 2 incidents, not with the reporters, but editors. We were banned once because of a story, that interview we had done with the Syrian Kurdish STF, I think #2 commander, about the incursion, which led that authorities to ban us. It was the first ban we had. And then we were again banned because of 2 corruption stories. And during these bans, one of the editors got cold feet, and she was really worried because she had heard, being encircled in a way. So she had to leave quickly the country. In the second case, 2 of our editors, both of them Kurds, one video editor and the other one was basically a sub-editor. She had at least 5 or 6 court cases, indictments against her, and the lawyer said, if you continue staying here, you'll end up in the clink. So you basically have to leave or make a decision. So she made the decision, and they both left under very arduous circumstances through Serbia, crossing the mountains, etc., etc. But they are in safety now.
Tinchwei, do you want to talk about, I mean, obviously Hong Kong had a very free media scene until recently. And what has been your experience now in creating, you talked about the difficulty you have with getting reporters, the security, but in terms of, trusting them and in terms of providing them the security that they need to operate?
Yeah, I don't think I have a perfect answer for this one, because obviously it's very, very difficult. And what's important, I think the most important challenge, the major challenge for us is to try to reduce the fear of the local journalists, because sometimes fear is just irrational. No matter how many security measures you're providing them, if they fear getting caught, they just fear getting caught. So it's a big challenge for us. We're still struggling with it now, but we do have many measures to help to protect local journalists, so that they wouldn't get into trouble. So of course, like you know, very secure communication platform is one thing. I think Hong Kong people become quite sophisticated in like working on these channels since the major protests in 2019. Also, we try to ask our journalists to work for us on investigative stories, which usually takes longer time to do, rather than like helping us to do, you know, just go to a press conference or just go to a court case and write a report and publish tomorrow, because like it will be like they will be easily recognized by the authority. We also we try to reduce the paperwork as much as possible. We don't sign contract with them. And when we ask them for invoice, we accept they use, you know, pseudonym. So that's, you know, even though these paperwork leaks to on the internet, they wouldn't face trouble. And of course, we allow them to report anonymously. I think this is like already very common for many countries already. Another major issue is payments, because this is obviously because of the know your customer you know, measure. So for all the payments, most of the time you have to use real names and things like that. But we make up like channels that are more secured and more secretly. So they can be paid in a more secured manner. But I think like we have just talked about whether giving them security measure is our responsibility. I think thinking a lot about these things and really have like the journalists protected is indeed our responsibility. But sometimes, I mean, if they get caught anyway, does it mean that like we are not doing our job right or things like that? Sometimes I also ask myself this question, because it's obviously no matter how good you do it, if the authority like want to catch someone, they are truly more powerful. You know, they have spies, they have police everywhere. So sometimes we also struggle for this as well. Sometimes we do talk to freelancers like this. Okay, we are giving you this set of security measure, but at the end of the day, if you get caught, if you get into trouble, we can only give you legal advice. So this is sadly this is what we can do.
If I may jump in about being detained, unfortunately, it's one of the KPIs of the impact of your work as well. Yeah, if you publish an investigation and it resonated and some of the journalists detained on your websites being blocked, it means that it hit the target, yes. Unfortunately.
Let's talk a little bit about security and surveillance. For those of you who are outside the country as well, I think one of you alluded to that earlier. Even though you've left the country, what operationally, what physical and digital threats do you contend with? And be as specific or as general as you want. I know for security reasons you only want to maybe go so far, but I'll let you answer that in the way that you feel comfortable.
So if you speak about digital threats, then it's hack attacks, it's from the state or state agent or allegedly state agents. We've been, like, email of our editor-in-chief had been hacked several years ago. Like it was DDoS attacks on the websites, but also from the social media platforms. For example, our channel on Vkontakte it's the most popular social media platform in Russia, has been blocked inside the country. So you can access it from Italy, or you can still access it from Russia but by using VPN, but unfortunately Russia is not so, although the level of digitalization is very high in the country, the usage of VPN is not widespread. Facebook and Instagram are banned inside the country. Again, you can access the platforms by using VPNs, but the share of the people who use VPNs to access Facebook is not so high. Twitter is banned, and also it was slowed down. And now we are facing the main challenge for this year. If they ban YouTube, if the authorities will ban YouTube inside the country, it's still accessible. It's a very popular platform. There is a lot of entertainment content on YouTube. If they block it, then it's one platform less for independent media to reach their audiences. Yeah, I would say that if we speak about the digital threats.
Yeah, Bruce, please, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, in terms of efficient measures from, at least from Ankara's side, has been banning websites. Nearly 200,000 of them are banned now. And it's a sort of a solid trend that still goes and intensifies now as we approach the May 14 elections. It's 3 weeks from now. And it will be a huge battlefield. In terms of challenging and maybe going around the bans, we of course we relied on VPNs. The Turkish, especially urban youth and middle class urban users are very tech savvy, as well as the Kurdish tech users, the digital domain. So it was efficient. But in terms of intensifying the bans in the past 2 years, we have seen growing attention from the regime side to social media giants, which have proven not to be that successful, actually. And there were several meetings with the Twitter, with YouTube, and the regime demanding their open offices in Ankara or Istanbul, which were refused, and it's still an ongoing issue. So YouTube is being the most intense hybrid media tool, if I'm allowed to use that word. And also the podcasts are growing. But in terms of threats, coming back to your question, there were several cases now in the past, again, 2 years. The hybrid media elements or components now in regarding Turkish journalism, there's a trend of individualization. Journalism has become much more individualized, partly maybe because of the polarization, but also abroad unemployed journalists from Turkey found a way to survive through Google ads, and one of them based in Germany, in Berlin, and he was kind of a blend of activist and journalist, and very intense series of YouTube videos, focused on corruption on the top level. He was attacked physically in his courtyard and beaten badly. And German authorities are still, I think, in pursuit of his case. In 2 other cases in Stockholm, Sweden, again, one YouTube journalist, individual, was in front of his child, 5-year-old kid, beaten to coma. He had to stay in hospital for about 5 weeks before he came back to life. And another case, again in Stockholm, journalist was beaten severely. So they feel this heat all the time, my colleagues outside. So that's the part of the threats that's ongoing.
So leaving the country, obviously, is not a recipe for safety necessarily. Tinchwei, you want to say something about this?
Yeah. Luckily, YouTube and Facebook and TGs are not banned in Hong Kong yet. So we don't have like this kind of banning problem. But we do have another issue that's related to social media sharing. So now I think we all know that the habitat for the readers to read, like to consume news stories is that they mainly read through social media. So and social media, of course, it relies a lot on readers like actively sharing the stories. But in Hong Kong, we recently do have like many cases for local people sharing stories that are deemed sensitive and be detained by police. And we also have even people who live outside Hong Kong who shared a story that were deemed political sensitive, and when they return to Hong Kong, they get caught in Hong Kong. So these kind of issues make people obviously not willing to share anything they think that which they think may get them into trouble. And if this is the case, then no one will share hybrid media's stories, which makes our distribution really difficult. So I think we are trying to develop new distribution channels to solve this problem.
May I add one element which I forgot to mention? For about 10 months, I think now, Deutsche Welle and Voice of America has been and remains banned in Turkey because of a dispute. The Ankara regime wants these two outlets to open offices and indirectly and in the end of the day abide by Ankara's rules, which were refused. And recently also Deutsche Welle had to shut down its offices in Istanbul. Deutsche Welle being, of course, one of the employers of many of my independent colleagues in Turkey.
Thank you. So I want to get back to distribution a little bit and audiences. You just pointed out that it's not that your audiences are face threats too simply for sharing your content. I'm curious from Sveta and Yavuz, what difficulties or successes you have in reaching the audiences you want to reach.
Yeah, thank you for this question. Actually, there is two dimensions. When you speak about the audience and think about the audience, there are two dimensions of this issue. The first one is actually how to, when you are hybrid media, if you are based outside the country, how do you not lose touch with the audience, with their needs, with their problems? How do you find the proper tone of voice? And the members of our editorial team that had to leave the country, they told me recently, and then they came back to Russia and they said, we realized that even 6 months abroad in exile, it changes your perspective. It changes your perspective. You lose, or you start noticing that you're losing this feeling of this reality that you try to report about. That's why it's so important to still have people on the ground, reporters, freelancers on the ground who are inside and who knows how what the problems of the people inside the country. And the second problem, it's with delivering the content, and because it's not only about the ban of the websites or social media platforms, but it's also because of these draconian laws that are active in Russia now for discreditation of the army, spreading fake news, so-called fake news about the so-called special military operation. So people are more reluctant to share content on their social media, but I can see, for example, from YouTube statistics that the share of the people who share our content through messengers increased significantly in comparison, say, with the situation 1 year ago, 2 years ago. So they wouldn't post our video on their Contact or Facebook page, but they will send it. They will rather send it via WhatsApp or Viber or Telegram to their neighbors or their friends. So, but it's hard for us. It's harder to, so to say, to control and navigate this process of the distribution of information. That's why the collaborations with our fellow independent media outlets are so important. We work on a regular basis with other independent media outlets, and we have this non-written agreements that, okay, we are sharing your article today, you're sharing our video today, so we are reaching out to the audience to our audiences this way, And another, I already mentioned the collaborations between text journalists and video journalists, but it's also about amplifying the effect and delivering message in different formats and different forms to different audiences. So I would say yes, it's the main issues and solutions.
And Yavuz, you have a new outlet. You really. So, what are your distribution challenges? Where are you looking to do that?
This is just weeks-old baby, so it's very difficult to give any perspective about that. But I can speak about Ahval, its experiences. We had a mission, I would call threefold mission when we began. First, reporting to Turkey for Turkish users, and reporting also to outside, to English-speaking audience, mainly decision makers. It's kind of an elite, and also the large chunks of the Arabic audience in Arabic. So 3 languages. The main issue with the Arabic strategy was there was so many misconceptions because of religious aspects, etc., about Erdogan. And his government, his links with the Muslim Brotherhood, etc. And these misconceptions, I would say, we managed to break some of it. We had, when we finished, I think about 550, more than 500,000 followers on Facebook, which is very popular in Arabic communities or Arabic countries. And also when we ended, we had about 250,000 followers in Twitter in Turkey. Turkey is Twitter country mainly. Facebook is more of the Erdogan followers domain, and we marked, I think, something around 150,000 there. So the threefold mission, which distinguished us, I think it was because there was so much self-censorship in Turkey about reporting outside. All those English-speaking outlets were basically seized and captured by the government, and they were imposing immense amount of self-censorship about covering economy, corruption, and foreign policy issues, which we thought we would strategically fill that vacuum, which was successful given the feedback and complaints that I received when we terminated Ahval News Online. Yes, I think the self-censorship is a huge challenge, and maybe our mission now approaching covering the elections, which FTP, my new website, it's a slow journalism website. We don't recruit or employ reporters. The main issue is genetically modified media created by Erdogan destroyed not only freedom, not only independence. I mean, there's not really an independent media in Turkey. It's partisan media, sharply divided like a watermelon. And also the so-called opposition media is biased. It doesn't really cover, as journalistically as it should do. It's basically a shouting match, as I see in Turkey, and pluralism has gotten destroyed, and we try to focus so much on independence as well as pluralism, because people have to make correct decisions, and both sides of these polarized media in Turkey, in my opinion, knowingly or deliberately or not, insulting the voters' intelligences, not giving space to the voters to see, different sides of the reality, and this is this kind of craze that's been going on right now, and I hope hybrid media can do something positively contributional to that.
Tincho, I know you wanted to add something. If you can also talk a little bit about self-censorship. You brought that up just now, Yavuz. Does that happen? Are there topics that you are still too sensitive, you stay away from, or report on, write about in a different way?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to respond to that point about exile journalists changing perspective. I think this is a very good point. This is one thing that we should as exile journalists, we should always remind ourselves what does the local people feel like in certain issues. But while at the same time we also have limitation. For normal people life, it's not just about politics and being critical to governments. You also have your lifestyle, things like that. So a regular media will have soft news and hard news, like put it together at the same time. But for hybrid media and exile media, if you want to work on a niche, probably you will need to be very critical to the governments. You will need to talk about politics and social issues all the time, because it's simply not just about a restaurant in Hong Kong, right? Because Hong Kong media can do that far better than you. So we have this kind of limitation, and then sometimes while the exile journalists change perspective, I think local people, I mean the local readers in Hong Kong can also change perspective as well. So after these political turmoils happen, after a few years, people can get used to a new life that is under constant censorship, for example. So maybe sometimes they get just fed up with politics. They just want to continue their own life. But on the other hand, for exile journalists, if you still want to do politics all the time, you still want to be critical to the governments, you may lose the resonance with the readers and after all these few years. So I think in this sense, how should we connect to local audience? This is also a problem we are constantly thinking. And for self-censorship, I'll just add a few words. I think that yes, I think even when you work in a hybrid model or an exile model, you still self-censor, because I think this is in the online era. The good thing is that even when you are not in the country, you can still report about the country. But the bad thing is that danger is everywhere. As Sharon has just said, living overseas doesn't make you instantly become safe. Everyone has connections in the authoritarian environment, and people for example in Hong Kong, in China, or in Russia can become hostages. To make exile journalists keep their mouth shut. So I think that yes, to be frank, we still think about self-censor all the time.
Thank you. So we just have a few minutes left. I just wanted to quickly talk about the logistical challenges of operating an organization, a news organization outside of your home country. The legal issues, travel issues, the money. Let's come back to the money. It always comes back to the money. How do you approach those?
So we've been lucky because we grounded the organization in Germany in 2012 with editorial teams. The first editorial team was in Azerbaijan, another team in Russia. We launched our Russian project in 2016. So we had this administrative structure since the very beginning, outside, in a safe country, in a democratic country with the rule of law. So it helps us in many aspects. Yeah, we can receive grants, we can do some commercial projects and trying to make some money, flexible funding, flexible money for the projects. So we were lucky in comparison with our colleagues from the media outlets that had legal entities inside the country, and when they had to leave, they came to Europe or to Armenia or to Georgia or to Kazakhstan, and they had to start from scratch. And they had to take care not only for visas for themselves, but also to start a new organization, to find the proper legal form for this organization, to open a bank account. So, and they're still struggling with this, and we are helping to them as much as we can. So, in this sense, I can't complain. Another question, if we speak about money, of course, the safest countries, it's usually Western Europe. the cost of living, the salaries, the cost of just operating the organizations are much higher than in the countries of our origin. So it doubles your budget sometimes. So for hybrid media or for media in exile that left like recently, it means that the budget, the expenses became higher and fundraising even more difficult. So yeah, I would say the main challenge that we see.
And we just have 1 minute left.
Yes, I will end up by saying that we are at a watershed now in terms of in the aspect of Turkey. We will know by the end of May whether or not opposition will win or the Erdogan regime will continue. This is a very serious, very critical watershed in the centennial of the Turkish Republic, coinciding with that. So if the first happens, if the opposition wins, things will start melting in a way. In a long term, not quickly, it will be a huge challenge because there's an immense economic crisis which will affect the media sector. But if Erdogan continues, I think the whole funder sphere in Europe and the United States should get prepared for decide whether or not intensely fund journalists from Turkey, but not only that, from Belarus and Russia as well. A colleague of mine, she's a funder now, living in the UK. She said it very astutely. She said, if they don't change their minds, meaning the funders who are reluctant, more and more reluctant, most of these, experienced editors from Belarus, Russia, Turkey, etc., and maybe even Hungary soon, will start ending up as window cleaners in 1 or 2 years. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for that optimistic way to end the panel. Thank you very much, Tinçoy, Sveta, and Yavuz. Thanks, everyone.